Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yewon, and I'm an assistant clinical professor in the special education program. And Dr. Susan De La Paz was my PhD advisor, and it's a great pleasure to visit her classroom to share with you a technical aspect of the work that I've done with her as part of my dissertation project. Now I'll demonstrate for you how to generate graphs from multiple baseline data, and we will look at actual data from our study that's now in press. And I will provide you with an overview of how we generated the graphs. So here's the raw data of one aspect of writing that we measured, which was causal reasoning in students' writing. And I color-coded this for you to see the different phases. So the light blue documents the baseline data. The yellow is the post-instruction or post-treatment data. And the green is the maintenance data, which is taken a few weeks after the intervention has been concluded. And if you try to graph this data, that really doesn't work because it's going to generate one graph. But we want to distinguish between each phases, that there's a separation between each phases. So what we're going to do is, the first thing you have to do is make sure that you organize and set up the data so that you can generate it into a graph. How we're going to do that is, as we all know, it's staggered. So there's your baseline for the same student, student 1, post-instruction, and maintenance. So this student will have 3 data points, or 3 lines that documents each phases of instruction. And I did that for all of the students so that you can separate each phases in a graph. And I'll show you what that might look like. So imagine you put this in a graph. Once you prepare your data, you're going to insert. And you're going to typically go for the line graph. There you have it. So this graph documents that you have 3 distinct phases and the lines are not connected. We want to make sure that the lines are not connected because we need to later put in a baseline to separate them. Okay, so what I typically like to do, and this might be a personal preference, is I like to work on the title and the legends and the axis in the Word document, and I feel like that's more pristine for me. Although people have different approaches, so what I do is I just take this out of my graph, and I'll do that for group 2. Let's put that in. What's great about Excel is that when you press on each chart, you know exactly which data you're incorporating into it. And then let's take group 3. So let's generate that graph. So we have 3 groups. Okay, so that's great. One thing I wouldn't do is change the size or the length of this graph, because that's going to screw up the dimensions and you're going to have a less consistent dimension your graphs. Okay, so I'm just, again, it's my personal preference. I don't like to title my stuff here, although you might have seen other people who like to label their legends. It's just not what I do in my, it's just not what we did here. So one thing that's important is, now that you have the 3 graphs of 3 groups in a staggered format, you're going to, first of all, it's not very good for you to have colorful graphs. Most publications or publishers will expect you to have black, and maybe the marker the little symbol you have here, that's something you could change, and that's how it was done for our manuscript. So what you're gonna do here is you're going to say, oh, that's that Sishin's data. And that was an English learner. She was an English learner. So we're going to decide to change the markers to make sure that we know the distinctions between these two students that are in the same group. So what you're gonna do is when you double click, or actually let's get not just that one marker, but let's double click the whole line. Let's try to do it's a little bit wonky. We got the whole line. And marker option, I hope it's not just that one. We're gonna give Shishin a circle. And you're gonna, oh, it's just doing that one line. Okay, there we go. There you go. Now we have the entire line. We want to make sure everything's black. And then we want to make sure also the marker is a circle. Okay, that's perfect. We're going to leave that as is. Okay. And now let's look at Andre's line. You definitely don't want it to be yellow. We'll take that out. So the line color is dark. We also want the symbol that attaches to each data to be dark. And in this case, I'm going to differentiate the students with English learners and students with learning disabilities using different symbols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the marker, and I'm going to say, students with LD, I want them to be represented by a diamond. And I want to make sure my diamond is a little bit differently sized than my circles, to make it easier for readers to see the difference. And I see one thing that I didn't do. I'll make sure you don't want a yellow filling. So make sure you do that. And one thing we had to do was we had overlapping data like this one and this one. And what Dr. De La Paz and I decided was that we would change the symbols or the markers for those data that was overlapped, because it just looks like there's only one data point, which is not true. So we said, okay, let's just, if you double click, you'll be able to get to that marker. And we changed it to a triangle to show that it was an overlap, and to make sure that, it's not, it doesn't get confused or doesn't overlap with other symbols. Just made it a little bit big. So if you see it, you can see that, that triangular shape. And you want to do the same over here. Okay. I think it's good. Well, I think that one is sized. You want to, it's a little bit wonky. So we have, we have formatted the two data points from two different students over here for baseline. You're going to do the same for post-treatment and for maintenance. So I'm not going to do everything because that's going to be pretty time consuming, and I'm pretty sure the demonstration here would have made sense to you. Okay, now what I'm going to talk about more is how do you transfer this to Word documents and other documents, or how do you keep this together? So these are three different graphs. One thing that you need to absolutely do is to group them. Make sure that you have everything as one picture. Okay, so we're not quite done yet. I made it sound like we're at the last stage of it, but we're not. One thing we do need to change. So the measure that we used was on a scale of 7. And if you look here on this axis, y-axis, you see that it has 8. Well, we don't want that. That's not very accurate. We're going to have that as our ceiling. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the axis option, and it's going to give you the bounds. What is your minimum and maximum? Definitely not 8. We're going to make that 7. Okay. So that's one thing we're going to change. And also, you might want a tick mark to make sure that you're following some kind of formatting for most publishers. So I'm going to say I don't want the small nitty-gritty line because this was an ordinal scale that we used. So we're going to use a cross. Oh, there we go. So that's beautiful. We're going to do the same for this x-axis. I'm going to just put a tick. I want the tick marks. And I want major, and I want it to go across. Okay. And typically, if you see a single case design graph, you will not see these grid lines. It's something that you will not include generally. So I'm going to say, let's go to chart design. And there's the, there's a huge improvement in the way they formatted these tools, and I love it. So if you go to the grid lines, you can just uncheck that. You don't want these grid lines. You just want just your data point. Okay. So I think this looks a bit dark or gray. I don't want that. I want it. Oh. Control Z. So let me see. So we are looking at the tick mark. Tick marks. Okay. And then I'm looking at a line, solid line. We want the color to be, there we go. Oh gosh, that was, okay. So that's great. So you're gonna do what we did here earlier to these other phases, okay? And you're gonna follow this formatting for your other groups. And you're going to make sure you add that tick mark and make sure these are not gray and these are not colorful. Okay, so now that we have this, what you can easily do on Excel, which I prefer to just work on Word, is you can easily, go back. If you want to just add the axis title directly on this graph, if that's what you prefer, you can do it here, both vertically and horizontally. And you can also add the title for the charts, which you saw that I took out. You could also include a legend to make sure your readers know that these symbols represent different populations of students, okay? And I think this is the final stage of it all. So typically, multiple baseline graph will include a phase line that shows you the separation of phases. And so, as I said, I don't like working on Excel to do that. I prefer to work in Word. But if you want to work in Excel, you could insert a shape and a line. So when you insert a line to document the phase line, you can press Shift and go down. Okay. Give a bit next to it. A little. Oh, and by the way, you can always change and play around with the style. Typically, it's a dash, but it's not always like that. And you can easily copy and paste because you have the same line over here as well. You have a line going there. Okay. And then you have another line going here. Okay. So that's something you might want to do. Actually, let's just finish that at least the first phase. I know this is, I don't want you to just look at me to make this baseline. Okay, that's not really good. Control Z is your friend. Okay, so you want to Control Z it. There. And remember to press. Remember to press Shift when you do this, because if your line will go crooked if you don't. And then I'm going to control. Just to make things a little bit. Maybe I went a little bit. So that's how your phase line might look like. It could just be a straight line depending on which publisher. It's a little bit wonky. So it takes a lot of, a lot of hours to clean this up, make sure your lines are straight and all of your legends are there and your colors are set. So that's why I'm abbreviating the demonstration a little bit. And let me show you. So if you work on this, it's going to look, the final product might look something like this. Let me just share with you. Okay, so this is, what the final product looked like. We worked in Microsoft Word after we generated these graphs to add in the labels and the legend. And that was the easiest way that we figured how to do. But again, it depends on the researchers who are making this graph. It really depends on what you prefer. I think that was about it. If you have any questions or if you're interested to talk more, I'll be very happy to connect with you. Good luck in this course and have fun. You're in really good hands. Okay.